Hey guys, welcome back to Cruising with Matthew, and today I have some really exciting cruise news to share with you all. Now, the United Kingdom Chamber of Shipping, in collaboration with the Cruise Line International Association, or CLIA, which I'm proud to be a member of, has released a framework for UK cruise operations during the COVID-19 pandemic. This has been submitted to the UK government and outlines measures to help enable a phased reopening of cruising. Now, these documents are probably 50 pages in total across the 4 documents within this framework. However, I've gone through it all and I've tried to pick out some key points so it'll give us all an insight as to what we can expect when cruising returns to the UK. Throughout this video, I'm going to show you a variety of videos that I've taken on board my cruises, so I really hope that you enjoy this video. This framework has been dubbed a culmination of collaborative work between the cruise operators as well as partners and health experts. It does stress, however, that this is an evolving document because, as we all know, our understanding of COVID-19 really has changed rapidly since the start of this pandemic. It focuses on measures to help reduce the risk of infection and transmission on cruise ships and essentially transposes the guidance that the UK government has been putting in place on land and putting it onto ships. It does stress, however, that these guidelines are based off England and not other parts of the United Kingdom such as Scotland and Wales. So the framework is essentially split into several sections. Firstly, it outlines prerequisites as well as measures which would occur prior to embarkation day, measures that would occur at embarkation day, what things would be in place on board, as well as when people would go ashore to visit ports, as well as the plan for disembarkation, and also contingency plans if there is an outbreak of COVID-19, and finally, how emergency procedures can be adapted. So these prerequisites include a risk assessment, which is to identify where transmission and exposure is likely to occur and how to mitigate risks. So this involves the likes of social distancing. So this includes the likes of signage, one-way systems, reducing the number of people in a venue, rearranging of seating. You also have passenger etiquette, so ensuring that there is a promotion of frequent washing of hands, the use of face masks where appropriate. There is also a massive focus on increased cleaning, whether it be in venues, in cabins, or throughout the entire ship during turnaround times. It also states that face coverings could be used in areas such as the terminal or other areas where you're not able to social distance. Reporting requirements are also considered key, ensuring that individuals have filled out a passenger location form prior to disembarkation, so if someone tests positive, you can get in contact with them. Crew should be considered to self-isolate upon arrival into the UK, although this is not a requirement under current UK guidelines. If they test negative after this isolation period, they can board the ship, and if not, they must self-isolate for 10 days. There's also the suggestion that crew should have frequent monitoring, temperature checks, and potentially PCR tests to identify there's no asymptomatic individuals. And there's also the suggestion that they should be divided up into small cohorts based on their job type and shift, ensuring that interaction between these cohorts is limited as much as possible. Communication has also been highlighted, ensuring passengers and crew are aware measures and preventative measures that are being employed to protect against COVID-19, and also what to do in the event of things such as an outbreak or if they think they have COVID-19. It's also been stated that itineraries should be considered to allow for things such as PCR testing in various ports and disembarking of positive patients when required, as well as altering the terminals in these ports when passengers disembark and re-embark the ship during times ashore to ensure that they adhere to the cruise line social distancing measures. Cabins should also be thoroughly cleaned, especially on turnaround day, but this happens anyway, and it's recommended that personal alcohol gel should be added in each cabin for personal use, and strongly suggested that only the people who live in that cabin should be in that cabin. The cruise line, where possible, should enhance ventilation, maximising the circulation of fresh air in accordance to manufacturers' recommendations, and also, if possible, open windows and doors. Those cabins which are going to be used for potentially isolating or quarantine passengers should have enhanced systems. There should also be a review of all the cruise line's procedures to see if there are ways in which you can improve and help mitigate the risk of COVID-19. And finally, external verification to ensure that these measures comply with the guidelines. Now, the framework then breaks down various aspects specific to different parts of your cruising holiday, with the first one being what measures should be put in place prior to embarkation day. Communication is considered considered really important, ensuring that before the crew or passengers go on board, they should be given ample amounts of information about the current recognised signs and symptoms of COVID-19. They should also be aware of the prevention methods and also suggest personal hygiene items to be brought on board as well. So I'd presume that would be suggested that you bring a certain amount of face masks and a certain amount of hand gel. And another thing that should be stressed is that you may be denied boarding if you test as positive for COVID-19 or if you show signs and symptoms of COVID-19. Another area is requiring clinically high-risk individuals as defined by the UK government's criteria, for example those people on chemotherapy, on immunosuppressants or severe lung conditions, to visit a doctor to identify if they are fit to travel. It's also stressed that you should have insurance and ensure that it covers COVID-19. Now I know that some cruise lines are starting to offer their own insurance which does cover COVID-19. It will also be important to consider the current UK travel guidelines at the moment, because otherwise you may end up invalidating your travel insurance. So then the guidelines move on to what to expect on embarkation day. Now, terminal infrastructure is really important, so you have to ensure that the terminals are rearranged in such a way to allow social distancing to occur. People will have to wear face masks, and also you will see the presence of perspex screens, directional arrows, and also staff on hand to advise and help prevent people from congregating in a particular area. It's also been suggested that allocated boarding times put into place, and I know that these, for instance on P&O, have always been a thing. However, I imagine they're going to be a lot stricter. It's likely that they're going to have baggage handling precautions as well. I believe that MSC are actually sanitising any items of baggage that go on board their ships, so I wouldn't be surprised if that is something the UK-based cruise lines do, and also if possible use multiple gangways in order to help social distancing. One of the biggest areas which I think a lot of people are wanting to know is what screening is going to occur on embarkation day. Now, primary screening, which is essentially when non-medical staff will use a health declaration form as well as observe for signs and symptoms of COVID as well as a temperature check. If these individuals are suspected of being at risk of COVID-19, you then may get an individual who is medically trained and will have to undergo an in-depth interview, medical examination and potentially a COVID-19 test to see if they have COVID-19. Now, for those individuals who do test positive for COVID-19, then there must be a route which allows them to safely exit the terminal and be transported home, and done so in a way that reduces the amount of unnecessary contact. One thing that I am really surprised by this screening is that I would assume that everyone would be kept tested for COVID-19, and I appreciate that a health declaration form is useful, but I wouldn't be surprised if people weren't entirely truthful on them. So I think this is something that will probably have to change. Now, once you're on board, one of the big things that I always love about cruising are food and drinks, and there has been some restructuring in this area. For example, until the UK government deems it appropriate, there will be no self-service buffets, which is not surprising. It's also been stated people should only dine with individuals within your same travelling group, and it's likely that you're going to have longer opening times for your restaurants in order to feed everyone. Naturally, you're going to have hand sanitizer available on arrival, with staff encouraging people to use it. The scrupulous use of hand sanitizer in the restaurant is something that has always been present on cruise ships, so that is something that I don't find surprising. Likewise, in-cabin room service may change, so you're likely going to have food delivered to the door, ensuring that crew don't go into cabins. Any leftover plates and cutlery should be left outside of the cabin, although I'm not sure how corridors are going to deal with this, because I've seen this occur a couple of times and it does tend to crowd the area a bit, so that may be something that they have to consider. Now, the measures relating to entertainment are quite vague, and the entertainment offered on board the cruise ship should be only those which are deemed as allowed by the UK government guidelines, which is very vague and doesn't really give much details besides the expected. To maintain social distancing, you need to reduce venue capacity, you may have to block off alternate seats and consider passenger flow, so you may have one-way systems and things like that. But one area which is quite interesting is that they need to alter the noise volume so people don't have to raise their voices and shout to speak to people near them, which I found quite interesting. Now, for those of you who love exercise, the recommendations are that the cruise line should try and promote using open-air gyms where possible, and people should change into their gym clothes and shower in their cabins, not in the actual area. The capacity and layout will be altered so social distancing can be maintained, and anyone who's used that gym, whether it be crew or passengers, should record their name and presumably cabin number. Frequent sanitising and cleaning will also occur, specifically exercise machines which are used by a large number of people. For those of you who love the pools, it's encouraged that you should shower before you go to the pool and use things like hand sanitizer. Any form of deck furniture, sunbeds and chairs must be rearranged for social distancing, and ideally things such as seats, menus, tables are covered in a material which can allow it to be frequently cleaned. The communal public areas are also something to consider as well, and the framework suggests that what you should try and do is avoid the use of lifts if you are mobile, and also reduce capacity in order to facilitate social distancing. Face masks may have to be worn when using the lifts, and also there will be the availability of hand sanitizer before and after use. Passenger flow will also be altered, so you'll have arrows to let people know which way you're meant to go, and also furniture in communal areas will be also rearranged to prevent overcrowding, but also to allow social distancing. The framework also states that you should try and use your own toilet if possible, but if you have to use the public toilets, then you're going to have things such as the urinals will have every other one taken out of use to facilitate social distancing, and doors in particular areas should be left open to reduce touch points. Now, for those of you who love getting your hair done or going to the salon, you can expect a standard change in these areas. So this involves changing the layout to facilitate social distancing. You may have to reduce the capacity of people in the room, take chairs out of use so people aren't sat next to each other, and also ensure that appointments are booked and you arrive only at that particular time, and this will help prevent overcrowding and things like that. They also stress on using contactless and obviously the use of hand sanitizer. In a similar way, shops have also been told to rearrange their passengers flow, but also stresses that clothes should not be tried on, and you should try and handle as few things as possible that are on display. If you return something later on in the cruise, the crew must either clean it, and if it's something that can't be cleaned, must be put into storage for 48 hours before putting it back on display. And again, it stresses contactless payment, the use of perspex screens and sanitizer. Now, I very much imagine things like Princess's medallion technology is going to become really popular, and I wouldn't be surprised if things like cruise cards become less and less used. Now, for the children, the framework states that you should encourage outside areas where possible, but if not, you should reduce numbers in the children's play areas to facilitate social distancing. Ideally, they want to try and group people into teams and have one particular staff member look after that particular team for the whole voyage. Activity should also be altered so you can help facilitate social distancing, and children should be encouraged to wash their hands, especially if food or drinks are given, as well as when they enter the kids club or when they leave it. It's also likely that self-service laundrettes are likely to be closed, and it's going to be suggested potentially that they should bring enough clothes for the whole trip. However, the commercial laundry service, which is run by the crew, will still be available. Next up are guidelines for visiting ports. They suggest that you should communicate to passengers about the potentially different guidelines which may be in place in different countries that the ship visits. There will be screening of passengers when they re-embark the ship in a similar way to embarkation, so that means your primary screening and your secondary screening for those who are deemed at risk. For those wanting to go on shore excursions, it stipulates that you should ensure that the external companies, if the cruise line is using any, should be using protocols which adhere to their regulations, and also the local regulations as well, particularly if they differ from the United Kingdom. To make sure that hand sanitizer is made available, and also when you're embarking the ship again to go to your next port, there is also the suggestion to wear face masks at all times, even if local guidelines don't suggest that you should do. And for tender ports, social distancing is a must, and also you may reduce capacity, so I imagine you're going to probably have more tenders deployed if possible to compensate for that, and they also suggest that you should have frequent cleaning of these tenders, specifically things like touch points. Now, next up is the saddest time of the cruise, which is disembarkation. Unsurprisingly, the requirements for disembarkation are identical to embarkation, making sure that social distancing is maintained, that baggage is cleaned, But contact tracing is going to be really important, making sure that passengers have a passenger locator form completed, likely online, so health authorities can get in contact with them or if someone tests positive. Now, the framework then also covers what are the contingency plans for an outbreak of COVID-19. So in addition to all the previous measures that I have mentioned, social distancing, enhanced cleaning, face masks, screening, there must be isolation areas, the availability of medical examination, lab testing via PCR to confirm that an individual has COVID-19, as well as aspects such as contact tracing, isolation of people who have had contact with that patient, and also the potential disembarkation of a positive patient. In some cases, there might also be a gradual restriction of services and events, or even potentially closing if a more significant outbreak on the ship occurs. It also stresses the importance of communicating this with passengers and crew so they can be kept informed, and also inform the Coast Guard and medical authorities if this ever occurs. Now, prior to sailing, they stipulate that you should have suitable amounts of PPE in case of an outbreak, and also plans for repatriation of individuals at key points along the route. This should include things such as making sure that they're close to international airports, which can help facilitate a complete or partial repatriation of those who are on board. Now, I mentioned earlier about isolation, and this will likely involve cabins which are away from the general population of the ship and should be left for those who are isolating if they're showing symptoms, or for those in quarantine, so individuals who've been in close contact but might not necessarily have it. If there is an outbreak, then the cruise operator should conduct a transparent review process to understand what actually happened and help prevent it from happening again. And you should also have designated key ports should also have the capabilities of providing an emergency response and also liaising with public health authorities as well. Now, in the event of an emergency, you do want to try and prevent a large gathering of people to maintain social distancing. There may be the suggestion that you wear face masks and use hand gel. However, in an emergency situation, the government guidance does note that you can suspend social distancing rules until people are in a safe environment. So you're not going to see things like reduced capacity on lifeboats and things like that. Additionally, you also have to consider muster drills. These must be carried out in accordance with the International Convention for Safety of Life at Sea, or SOLAS. Potentially what you may well have are people wearing face masks and also social distancing, reduced capacity of venues and things like that. You may also be able to have it available in your cabin. Additionally, there is a recommendation that you should have a member of the crew or multiple members of the crew to monitor the compliance of the COVID-19 management plan. These people would liaise with the highest levels of organisation within the cruise company, but also with the relevant health authorities when required. The framework for UK cruise operations during COVID-19 is really exciting because it represents a first step to getting cruisers restarting within the United Kingdom. This is not to say that I believe this is the be-all and end-all of cruising, as I do think that as the pandemic gets brought under control and our understanding of COVID-19 improves, we will be able to pull back some of these measures. And I do believe there are going to be improvements made within this. For instance, I'm surprised that there's no requirement to have everyone tested on embarkation day. However, it will evolve and it will improve, and it helps set out some basic guidelines to understand what cruising is going to look like when it finally restarts. So that was my video talking all about the framework for UK cruise operations during COVID-19, and I really hope you enjoyed this slightly information heavy video. If you want to know more about Cruising with Matthew, then please take a look at some of my other social media sites, including Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and a Facebook group. I post in all of these daily, so I'd love to see you there. If you have any thoughts about this framework, then please comment below and let me know what you think. I really hope that you found this information useful, and I hope you have a fantastic week. So this is Cruising with Matthew, and thank you so much for watching.